do a recording on this. All right, welcome everybody to another session. Today we're going to be focusing on AutoCAD tips and tricks. I grabbed this picture from website. Apparently this guy had tattoos of AutoCAD symbols, icons on their hand. I don't know why, but it looks nice. So that was part of the AutoCAD tips and tricks. Okay, for this office, we move on to BIM, but why are we still using AutoCAD? Well, a couple things. When you go online, you search for a product, it's going to be in AutoCAD. Okay, when you download them, you can put it inside the Revit. It's going to be basically AutoCAD imported into Revit. The other thing is that a lot of our surveyor and consultants, they're going to be using CAD. Okay, Civil 3D is their platforms, and sometimes you will get into projects where they're using MicroStation. So that's the thing. You cannot get away with it. The other thing is that Autodesk has not figured out an easy way to edit DWG within Revit. So I've been asking them to do this for so many years, and they still say, nah, that's not our priorities. But sometimes they have to have some sort of a tool to migrate us, the AutoCAD people, so that they could edit certain things inside Revit. They have not done that. DWG has a long history. As you know, that AutoCAD is almost, I think it's already been 30 years old. All right, it's been very, very long. And they did release a format called DXF. If you saw DXF, it's actually drawing exchange format. So basically, in the past, AutoCAD DWG format was a proprietary, so they would not let people secret how their format works. So they did this DXF, which is it allows you to translate stuff. If you open it with the Notepad, it actually specify what each layer does, everything. So it's verbatim. So you can actually open it with a Notepad. And the other thing is that since we're only in North America, but if you go into like different parts of the world, okay, they're still using AutoCAD predominantly because labors are cheap, and they're just massive people from school that still grew up with just using AutoCAD. And the other thing is that pirated software, it's all AutoCAD, okay? So you know that people is going to be basically using CAD. Okay, a couple things CAD can do that Revit can't, okay? One of the major things I always ask Autodesk is that please give us linking PDF documents, okay? So far they say no, we're still working on it. That's one of the things that Revit, AutoCAD can do, is that you can link the DWG files directly into your CAD, and then you can basically trace stuff over. And the nicest thing about it in 2017 is that they allow you to take in PDF drawings and translate that into DWG file, so you can actually manipulate them. Okay, it's pretty cool. The nice thing about AutoCAD is that it can read large distance files. So let's say if you have a drawing that's in kilometers, right? For Revit, it basically stops at 2 kilometer range. Anything beyond that, you cannot do that. With AutoCAD, you can do millions and millions of kilometers. Okay, so that's why CAD still has its place. And the other thing I always find it very funny is that you can actually build microscopic, like let's say machinery parts and stuff like that. It's more pertaining to engineer, right? So you can actually do like microns. Whereas Revit, you're basically limited to, I think it was like 1 millimeter or something. If you go lower than that, it will just say, nope, doesn't work, it's too small. Okay? CAD, I always put this picture up because CAD, I think it's always going to be for engineers. For architects, we just hate it, right? It's not a visual thing. That's why you see a lot of the other vendors like Vectorworks, ArchiCAD, and all that stuff, because a lot of the programs are more visual, kind of like that's how people gravitate towards. AutoCAD is mostly engineer, okay? It's built for engineer. It feels like an engineering tools, okay? For the longest time, I was like talking to a lot of architects. They always say, why I cannot get this look, why I cannot get that look. Yes, because it's an engineer. At the end of the day, you want to print it out, technical drawings. That's pretty much it. All right, today the sessions, I'm trying to basically demonstrate how you can work CAD smartly, okay? Sometimes what happens is that user has old habits. Like if you guys have old habits, in the past that you use, we can demonstrate you alternatives like how to use it for, let's say if you want to make it more like kind of like how you think about BIM, you can do that in CAD, but just that you kind of have to let go of your old habits. AutoCAD has some automation. Okay, there's a couple tools that you could use to automate your stuff. Okay, so I'm just gonna demonstrate that. I put this picture because sometimes, not sure if you're working in CAD or really angry, is that you always get frustrated inside AutoCAD. Something always goes wrong, okay? All right, let's do some demonstration. Today we're going to start with AutoCAD, okay? So AutoCAD is a pretty primitive, it's a primitive tool. So I guess a lot of the profession, this is the software that they use. The one thing that have changed for a number of years is that they keep adding in new buttons and ribbons and all that stuff. The newer format, the 2019, they're basically combining all the tools from electrical, mechanical, and all that stuff combining to one format. Which is, I don't agree with that, but that's the way. But for all the AutoCADs, it's always going to be black background. But if you want to change the background, you guys know how to do it, or sort of? Okay, I'm not going to go cover that. Now, the first thing I'm going to demonstrate is that, let's say you receive a file from consultant. Okay, I'm just going to open up a file. Okay, let's assume that you have a file from a consultant that you use. Let's say this is the survey drawings. Okay. Now, let's say survey drawings, this is the first thing you want to do is that you want to check their units. Because every time when you receive files from consultant, they're going to be working with Civil 3D. And most of the time when you type in, let's say I'm going to use the units, okay, make sure that you always set them to the correct units. Okay, one of the major issue with, let's say, a user that's using AutoCAD for a long time is that they don't look at the units. They assume that, oh, it's wrong, I have to scale everything. So the new version, I'll just say don't do that. Okay, first check what units they are. If it sets to unitless, like that by default, okay, you have to make sure that if it sets to unitless, the first thing you could have to do is you kind of have to go in there and kind of measure or use like some sort of a visual cue saying that if there's a meters or feet, okay, because that's something that it's very important is that you try to find the object, like what's the distance of that, right? So let's say, for example, this distance, it says that it's 276. It could be 276 feet or it could be 276 meters, okay? Whenever you receive files from civils, they always work in those two units. They're not going to be in millimeters. Don't ask them to translate that into feet and feet, inches, or millimeters because they won't do it for you, okay? You kind of have to make sure you understand, okay? So this one, it's already in meters, so I'm just going to say set it to meters. Okay, that's the first thing important. Once you've done that, now the next thing you want to do is that do like a polyline and then start from 0, 0. Okay? Oops. Let's see. Polyline 0, 0. And then you just draw like a line and you just place it in there. So what this does is that it allows you to know the distance between your origin point to, relative to your site. Civil is going to use the UTM, which is like the World Universal Coordinate Systems, right? So for us, we don't care about that. If you are doing it in Revit, you kind of have to know where that position is going to be. For AutoCAD, if you're using AutoCAD files, you don't have to do much, but I'll show you one way to kind of make that 0, 0 closer, right, without modifying this. All right, one thing I would do, okay, once you establish the units, the next thing you want to do is that for this particular drawing, let's say I'm going to make it into architectural. Okay, let's say we're using feet and inches. So when you XREF that in, that drawing in, okay, I'm just going to attach the drawing, and I'm just going to go into the surveyor. Okay, just hit open. Now you notice that if you set your unit correctly, it will scale your drawing automatically. Okay, in the past it doesn't do that. So I think ever since 2006 onward, that's when they start to implement this sort of a strategy that you have a unit and it will auto scale every time you set it correctly. So you no longer have to scale everything, because I know that in some cases, this drawing, someone actually scaled by 1,000 because they say that, oh, it's a meters, they want to scale it up. So in this case, don't do that, right? Just keep it to the units, and then just watch out for this, okay? And the first thing it's going to ask you, where do you want to place it? I'm just going to say 0, 0. Okay, and then when you zoom out, okay, your drawing is there. Now let me draw in polyline 0, 0. You notice that why is my 0, 0 there when the original drawing is actually miles and miles away? Okay, so how you do that, I'm going to go back here and open up the XREF. Okay, if your drawing is miles and miles away and you want to make, let's say, your XREF closer to 0, 0, what you have to do is that you have to use the command called base. Okay, you type in that command. Okay, right now the base point was defined by this particular coordinates. You can change it and say, I want that to be my new base point. Okay, when you save that, okay, I'm going to go back here, and then when you reload it, you notice that the insertion point changes. Okay, you can modify that. Okay, this is one per drawing, but you have to make sure that when you do this, you kind of have to tell engineers that for our drawings, this is our kind of like the insertion point that we're using. Sometimes they understand, sometimes they don't understand, depending on how you do it. But this is how I kind of get all my drawings closer to 0, 0. The reason why you do not want to have it far, far away is that once AutoCAD reaches like certain millions of a decimal places, your drawing starts to break down. So when you draw lines or do offset in certain things, it just will not do it because that number is too huge. So this way, if you set it to 0, 0 and make it closer, it makes it a little bit easier for you. Okay, so your hatches, everything is going to work properly. Any questions so far with this? So AutoCAD has scale, everything, okay. The next thing I'm going to talk about is line type. Sometimes what happens is that when you put in a line type, let's say for example, I'm going to draw an object inside this, right? And I'm just going to create a layer. I just create a layer to say this is hidden. I'm just going to go with 0 hidden. And I'm just going to basically just put any color, just say green, okay, and then just load it. And let's go divide. Okay, let's say divide. That's my line type. And then I'm just going to draw a building right here. And then properties, and then I'm going to go like that. I'm going to save it. Okay, this is just a demo drawing. All right, so when I reload this, you notice that line type is really, really small. So what happened in the past is that people tend to do this, LT scale, say we want to make it 100. Okay, that's how we do it. In new ways, don't do that. Okay, the new ways, you kind of have to use this scale, okay, to drive your annotative objects. Similar to how Revit does it, right? So we want people to kind of encourage them to use this. The first thing I want to do is that I'm going to hit the custom, and I'm going to hit reset and say just Imperial scale. Now what I can do is that I can just go in and say this is a 1/4 inch, and when you go regenerate, that's how we do it. And then if you want to go even smaller, let's say 1/2 inch, it auto generates. Okay, that's how we do it for line type scale. Okay, but if you want to do like, oh, that still looks too big, make it like half a scale, but this scale already been set. This is where you say LT scale, let's say 0.5. So what happens that all your scale is going to be 0.5. Okay, similar to that. Now the other thing you have to watch out for is that I think I did write this documentation, what you should do. Whenever, if you don't see, let's say for example, when you create a view, let's say I'm going to go rectangle. I'm going to create a letter size, so let's say 8.5 by 11. Okay, and then I'm just going to say from this distance to this distance, and then, oops, That's okay. Now in here, you can also change that scale. Let's say, for example, I wanted this to be 1/16. Oh, that's too small. Let's say 132. Sorry, my mouse is a little bit wobbly. Okay, there you go, 1/64. Now you're noticing that sometimes you have this black clashing with the color. So what you could do is that if you want to set this particular view into black and white only, what you could do here is that you could go right-click, click on Page Setup Manager, and you can click on Modify, and this is where you could say, let me choose one for this. And you could say hit Display Plot Style, okay, and hit OK, and then close. What happens is that it's going to make this particular drawing to black and white. Okay, so that's how I always do. For plotting, I always like to do basically set all of this to black and white so that whenever you put in color, you know that this is what you see is what you get. Okay, so if you're into that mindset where Revit, it's always going to be what you see, what you get, I always tell people in the paper space where you want to print, you right-click and go Page Setup Manager. Unfortunately, you kind of have to do this for every view. Okay, but if you have a template already set up, then all of this thing is already done for you. Okay, it's a couple of tricks that I usually use. Okay, now you notice that in here, the line type just doesn't look right. All right, so the first thing you want to do is that you have to say paper space LT scale. Okay, that's all right. It's going to be 1 or 0. Okay, if it's 1, it means that it looks correct. Okay, next thing you want to do is that you want MS LT scale. It's 1, it's correct. And then LT scale. Let's see if it's 1. Is it correct? Yeah, it's because it's too dense. If it's too dense, then this is where you're going to say LT scale 0.1. So that's what it's controlling it. Okay? Any questions so far? I know it sounds confusing in the beginning, but if you do run into this problem, just let me know. I'll help you figure it out. Now, one of the weird things about AutoCAD is that you will get into a chance where line type scale will screw you up, okay? Because AutoCAD has 2 line types. One is the metric version. One is the paper space the Imperial version. How you tell if it's a metric or Imperial? I'm just going to use this particular one. Okay, so when you click on this, and when you hit load, you notice that there is one called the AutoCAD ISO. That means that it's a metric. If you want to change that to Imperial, what you have to do is that you have to type in the command called measurement. All right. So basically, right now it's set to 1. But if you hit to 0, and then I go layer, and I click on this, you notice that when I load, it goes back into Imperial line type. So what happened is that sometimes in a process, you will have people copy and paste line type from metric and then put it into the Imperial. And sometimes you're noticing why this line type just doesn't make sense. And then what people tend to do with that is that they go in here and they go change all this line type scale to make it look correct, right? Don't do that, okay? If you do run into this problem, the simplest fix is that, let's say if you want to convert this line type into Imperial, first thing you do is that you type in measurement, okay, like what I said. Then you go to layer, and then what you're going to do is that reload all the layers and say okay. And then you say you want to reload them all? Yes. Okay, fine. And when you hit regen, that's what it's going to look like in Imperial. And when you start saving this, okay, now if you want the drawing, right now it's not going to do anything. Okay, it's not going to do anything until you hit VISRETAIN. I know this is a lot. It's called VISRETAIN. And what that does is that if you have any drawings that you reset in the original AutoCAD, right, like the XREF, what VISRETAIN does is that if you set to 1, it means that it's going to basically read whatever the current drawings. If you set 0, it means that whatever layer you put in, let's say for example, I should change the color. I forgot to do that. So I'm going to go to model. This is what it looks like. Let's say for example, in this particular drawing, I changed that color into something else. Okay, let's say I'm going to change the color into, let's say, red. Okay, I'm going to save it. Now, if I don't have the VISRETAIN and set it back to 1, when you reload it, it just doesn't do anything. It doesn't change the color. But when you hit VISRETAIN and set to 0, and now when I reload that, you see that it picks on that particular line type. Okay? Now I can say LT scale, just make it 1. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But make sure when you put VISRETAIN, I always like to change it back to 1 and then put it back to the original state. Because what happened is that whenever you have layer freeze this, let's say for example certain XREF you do not want, certain objects or layers you do not want to show, the minute set to 0, it's going to reset back to whatever is unhide or unfrozen in this particular XREF. So it will pick on this particular drawing as its original state. Okay? So normally I don't do it. I always change it back so that you avoid having this, kind of messed up on you. Any questions so far? That's a lot of information, right? Just for a little topic. So I won't bore you with that stuff, but if you do run into that issues, you can always certainly just ask. Okay, couple things. Okay, if you want to select certain objects inside AutoCAD, let's say for example this one, rather than picking individual, you can go right click and say select similar. And what it does is that it will basically select those objects together. Now, what this does is that it has this called the isolate object. You can hide object or isolate object, similar to how Revit does it, right? So you can hide certain objects. Use this a lot, okay? So let's say I'm going to go that. Okay, now I hide that object. This is only temporarily, then you can just change it back and say end object isolation. I use that a lot. Like if you are using Revit and then you go back into AutoCAD and it's like, oh, where's all this tool similar to Revit? That's a couple of similarity inside Revit that you could use. Some of the tools, model, paper, I'm pretty sure you guys know all this, so I won't go to it, and then you can always create new, some other stuff. Okay. Now, let's say, for instance, you receive a file and then you want to do a batch printing. Okay, how would you do that? So let's say, for example, I have a drawing. I'm just going to duplicate a drawing, okay, that I did for the AutoCAD. Let's say, for example, I have a building details. I'm just going to make a copy of this, and let's call this 11. Okay. I'm going to open this drawing. And now what it does is that, oh, this has one tab. No, that's not good. I want to have a drawing that has multiple tabs. So this is not a good example. So I'm going to delete that just in case I don't duplicate anything. So I'm just going to use one of the drawings. Let's say, for example, this drawing. I'm just going to make a copy, okay? So it won't affect the original drawing. You will get into this issue with AutoCAD is that some guy is saying, oh, I received a file from consultants, and I want you to print all the drawings, okay? So sometimes what you end up getting is that you gotta have a lot of tabs, okay? Like probably a lot of this drawings just to print it out. You can go to each individual drawings and print each individual time, but that is just a complete time wasting, okay? I'm gonna show you one way to do this. Okay, to do this, what you could do is you could use what's known as the Sheetset Manager, SSM, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is that you could say new sheet set, or you can use a template. I'm going to say new sheet set, for example. I'm just going to say example, that's fine. Architectural sheet set, sure. Where do you want to place it? Sure, just say this is for plot. Okay, and then I don't care about the property. All I care about is, sure, why not? It's finished. So the next thing you want to do for architectural, okay, this is just a template. What you could do is that you could say import layouts as sheets. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go browse for that drawing. And I think I did the tire shop, which is the copy one. And hit open. Excuse me. So what it does is that it basically picks up all the drawing list. And we're just going to say import check. Okay. It's going to take, depending on how many, sometimes you're going to have like 20, 30, 40 different sheet layouts. What it does is that it allows you to basically just fill it into this particular drawings. Now what you can do with this is that you could go right click, publish, okay? You say full scales, you can say publish to PDF, okay? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go modify this. I'm going to say modify page setup. I'm going to modify this. For this, I'm just going to say, okay, give me a PDF, Adobe PDF, or you can say AutoCAD PDF, general documentation, display, and I'm going to use one of the CTB. Just put anything. So I'm just going to put this as my CTB file. That's my size. You can change it to, HD. That's what I want to look like. Extend, center plot. The reason why I put extend is because if you made a mistake, let's say for example you have objects that's outside your AutoCAD, let's say this border, it will print off the side. So that tells you that in this drawing you wanted to keep it as clean as possible. So I always put extend. You can do layout. What happened with layout is that you have to be careful because if someone set up the template incorrectly, the layout means that it's going to be whatever that person set up their first point and second point. Okay, be careful because sometimes it could get shifted. Most of the time, I just use the extend. It works out 99% of the time, and then say okay. And then once I've done that and close, and now what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to go publish using override and say okay, this is my full scale, and it's going to ask me where I want to put it. So I'm going to put it in a general location. I'm just going to call it plot, and then say select that. What it does is that it's going to go through all the drawings and it's going to process it all the plots simultaneously. So if you do run into this kind of a thing where the manager is asking you, oh, we received files from consultant, but they're all AutoCAD, they're like 40 different files, rather than going into each individual, if you do this, it saves you time. So right now the process is going to take me about like a couple of minutes. It's going to print everything, create like a set, and then and that's what it's going to do. Okay. Any questions so far with this? No? All right. So let's dive a little bit deeper into Sheetset Manager, why I use it a lot. Okay, so in this project, I'm going to show the benefits of using Sheetset Manager inside AutoCAD. But first, I'm going to finish this. So Seattle, do you have any question? Or is it just information overload? Okay, yeah, I have to do this very quickly just to show you the glimpse of it. If you don't get a lot of this information for today, that's okay, because if you are interested in some of this topic that I've talked about, I could always do it more of like 101, or do a really focus on certain topic. Okay, good. So the nicest thing about this is that once I plot it and finish it, it's going to place it here for plot. Okay, I didn't do it correctly. You know the reason why, right? It's because I did not set the scale. Something to kind of, just be reminded of, all right? So that's okay. This is just for demonstration. But if you want to change it, so this is how you do it. It's that you go to Publish, Manage Page Setup. Okay, click on Modify, and then this is where the scale. Okay, you want millimeters. So this is a millimeter project. Okay, something to keep in mind. Okay, just because scale is very important inside AutoCAD because it doesn't know if it's a meters or meters or inches, so you kind of have to make sure you set. All right, let's dig deeper into why I use Sheetset Manager. Now, if you have a project, let's say for example, what Sheetset Manager does is that it's basically organized your drawings based on the sheets you have inside your project. So what this does is that it allows me to basically open up the drawing very quickly. So this is kind of like, think of it this as if you are in Revit, this is a project browser. Okay, if I want like a certain drawings, okay, I could go into this and then open it up. Like this is kind of like my like window browser kind of drawings. So you can click on it and then show the preview and then see who else is working on it. Okay, it has my username on it because I've worked on it. So I could just double click and then what it does is that it basically goes into this particular drawing. Okay. And then if I want to close it, I'm just going to close this drawing. Now the benefit of doing this is that, let's say for example you have a drawing and then you want to generate a huge list of your drawing. Typically for AutoCAD, you kind of have to go in and manually type it in, all that stuff. In Revit, it's pretty easy, right? You just basically generate those information. So this is where Sheetset becomes very important, because if you are able to set all this information in there, you can actually create a sheet list table, okay, from your drawing. So say for example, I'm going to put in like a sheet list. So the first thing I'm going to do is that click on this and say this is my drawing list. All right, you can add a bunch of parameters if you want. Let's say, for example, I'm probably going to put in scale, okay, and say okay. And what it does is that it basically going to generate your sheet based on what you specified. There you go. Let's say if I ever change any of the information, let's say, for example, for this one, I'm going to property cover page. I'm going to say instead of cover sheet, I'm just going to say cover page. Okay, so what this does is that when you right click and say update that information, you notice that that information also automatically updates. Okay, this is very similar to how Revit behaves, right? But it doesn't automatically generate it. You just have to go in there and, you know, just update it. So it has its usefulness. So if you do run into like AutoCAD projects where you kind of have to do this kind of setup, let me know. I'll help you how to establish this, right? The nicest thing about this is that you can actually take the whole set and you can right click, you can go e-transmit, you can go publish, okay, using page override. I have like a bunch of overrides there, so that it allows you to basically do this very fast, okay? And then the nicest thing about this is that, let's say I'm going to create a new drawing. Let's say I'm going to use one of my floor plan. Let's say this is my drawings. I'm going to use the details, and I'm just going to basically duplicate it, just delete. Let's say duplicate. Duplicate. Move to copy. Yeah, unfortunately it doesn't have a duplicate, so you kind of have to use the move and copy. I wish it could be different, right? So what you have to do is that you say move to the end and just say create copy. I'm still talking to Autodesk, saying that make the tools very similar so that people from Revit and CAD will not have issues going back and forth between the products. They should be similar. I mean, come on. Anyways, okay, so now I copy that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete all the, come on, where's my def points? Okay, so I have my def points right here turned off, so I'm going to get rid of it. Now, there's one tool, like right here you have this, and you have this freeze button. You know what that does, or you don't know? Sort of? No. Okay, I'll tell you what this does. Off is basically just, you know, the object is off, but it's still there. Okay, when you hit delete or erase, right, and then you select all, anything that's off, it's also going to get deleted. Freeze is basically, that layer is basically frozen. You cannot touch it. Even if you hit delete, it just doesn't delete it. This is called the global delete. So basically, if you turn this off, it means that all the views everywhere, it's going to get turned off. Now this one, it's independent per view. Okay? So if, let's say for example, you want this object to be turned off in this particular view, you click on this guy right there. So that's this view. I froze that layer in that view, and then the other view will not get will not be frozen. Okay, turn them on. I'm just going to delete this. Okay, get rid of this. Get rid of that. All right. I know that some of you guys are very familiar with how Revit works. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm gonna basically do a view of a detail. Let's say, for example, I did a detail. This is my detail. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a view. Okay. So first you hit V for view. Now I'm just going to say click on new and say this is my new detail. Okay. I'm going to hit define window. Let's say this is my new detail. Okay. Sure, that's good. And then say OK. And then you notice that there's a new detail. And then I'm going to save that detail. Now what happened is that in this particular drawing, I'm going to go back to, where is it? This one. So now what I want is that I want that new detail and then be placed into the sheet. So what you could do, you see that there's a new detail. Okay. Again, go place it in here. Oh, I see. Okay. One thing I forgot to do. This view, it's not attached to the sheet set, so it doesn't know what view you want to attach it to. So the first thing I would do is that once you save it, I'm going to basically put, come on, drag. Oh, geez, come on. Drag and drop. No. If it doesn't work, just always use this. Import. Go browse, and I think this is 4. Okay, so I'm going to go to AutoCAD, and then just use that. And you notice that you see that the rest of the other stuff is already part of the sheet set. It's not available to import. Every time you create a new one, anything that is copied from the previous one, you can import them in. Okay, those sheet set. So I'm going to go import check. Okay, just leave it as it is. And now what I'm going to do is that I want to basically drag and drop this detail. And then now what you could do here is that you could actually select different scale that you want to put in. Let's say I want to do 1 to 10. If you want, I just say 1 to 5 and then just place it there. It's going to take a while because it's XREFing certain things. So what it does is that it basically takes all that drawing, it'll XREF it, it'll freeze the layers and does everything background and then just place it in there. For you guys, it's similar to how Revit behaves, correct? So it takes that detail, you just create a view, and then you just plunk them in there. And then, yeah, for some odd reason, this one is in Imperial, so I have to scale everything up by 25.4. But if you have a template, this would work with the Imperial. So I have to go edit this field and change it to 1 to 5. So this is 1 to 5. Now, you can change the name. So the nicest thing about this is that it keeps track of what view you put into the drawings. So let's say, for example, that's a 400 series, right? You notice that there's a new detail. And now what you could do is that new detail, I could just say rename and give it a like 1 or A1. And say this is a parapet detail. Okay, it keeps track of that. That's the nicest thing about this. Okay, that's a parapet detail. Now the next thing you could do is that when you go back into your drawing, let's say my proposed plan, if you want to reference that particular parapet detail into this, let's assume that this is the parapet that you want to put in. So now what you could do is that you could take that parapet detail, right click, and place a call out. And here I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to put a section here. And I'm just going to scale this up. Property, scale this up 25.4. Okay, now it doesn't have the drawing number, is because I never defined them. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to go in and renumber. You could say that this is going to be 800 or 900 or whatever details. Let's say this is my details. And when I regenerate that information, okay, this also gets regenerated. So similar how you work with Revit, okay, very similar. But the unfortunate thing about this is that they're all dummy tags, right? But when you print them, it has this, I should do a a set. So once you have all this thing established, everything is plotted. I'm just going to open up one view. So if those view has, yeah, there's a link. You can actually link them. So when you create, well, actually not this one, because what happened is that when you put those fields and it references it correctly, and when you hit the plot, let's say I'm going to do an example. I should say manage page setup override. Okay. There is a, if you use the AutoCAD General like PDF, what happened is that it allows you to basically create this dynamic links. Okay. What that means is that inside Revit, when you have a section, any of those reference, it's when you do more like those multi-page PDF compressed into one particular PDF, is that when you click on the plan, anything you click on those this particular information, it's going to link to that particular view. I'm not sure if you guys done it or don't understand. So what does is that inside the AutoCAD you can do the same thing. Okay, so what this does is that I'm not sure if it's this one. I think I have to double check. I've done it once, but it just out of the fluke, right? Because I was clicking on this, it actually linked it to the correct view. So if you click on this, there's a hyperlink. It will link to that. It's kind of weird, one of those weird things. Yeah, unfortunately for this demo, it doesn't. Let's see if it does it. I think when you hit Shift, it will open up to that view. For some reason, this doesn't do it, but you kind of have to play around with it. Okay, this project, it's available. If you guys really want to kind of like look into how this Sheetset Manager works, it's kind of like, I kind of introduced this because we had so many consultants that, it's using AutoCAD, and then they have no way of, keeping track of what drawings going to put in here or put in there. So what I did here is that a lot of the details are repeating. So this project has this parapet wall display on number 3 and number 4. So I just used that one view that I've created, and then I just superimpose it on both sides. Okay, it's very, very quick and very easy. Okay, any questions so far? Nice thing about this is that you can e-transmit it. So let's say if I want to e-transmit, so what it does is that this set, if you only want to send that set to the consultant. Oh, I see. Cannot save because I haven't saved. Okay, yeah, that's the problem. So let's say I'm going to e-transmit this. There we go. So what you can do is that you can e-transmit that and then set it up and say, okay, I want a standard so that there's no binding happening. This one I want to set it as zip. Okay. And then what happens is that when I click on standard and say, okay, where do you want to put it? I'm just going to say, put it, sure. I'll take that drawing and then it will zip everything up and then just give it, and you can send this to consultant. And that's it, everything is intact. Any question? Any AutoCAD lingering question that you guys have? Yeah, one thing to keep in mind is that AutoCAD is a very, it's an ancient program, but unfortunately there's always going to be some misstep, especially in scaling part, right? So if you don't understand how certain thing works, let's say for example I'm going to do a style. Sometimes what happens is that people put in text information. That's fine. That's how we used to do it. Just keep in mind when you're working with scale, if you set it to correct scale and your drawings are annotative, it will auto scale. So you don't have to type in the calculator saying that 3.5 millimeters times it by 100, so it's 350. You don't have to do that anymore. So what that does is that if you want to create a new one, let's say this is text, let's say I want it to be 4 millimeter, okay? Make it 4 millimeter, and then set current, okay? So what happened is that if I double click on this, if I change to 1 to 50, then every time when you create something, oh, what is going on? test. Oh, I see. Okay. I'm going to add that scale and then get rid of that. There we go. Okay, they're scale driven. Okay, if you add that scale, you have no problems. Everything's going to look consistent. Okay, just shy away from, you know, this is my text, and then what you have to do is that I'm going to scale, because that's the biggest grunt, is that people scale stuff. Okay, AutoCAD has no control over who scale it, what scale, or whatever, because the program was built to every objects can be scaled, everything can be manipulated, so it's very flexible in that sense. But if you want to keep it very consistent, make sure that it's annotative scale driving your text scale and driving everything inside your AutoCAD. That's pretty much my tips and tricks. Any question? Oh, did you know that Revit was introduced last night? Well, if you haven't know, Autodesk just introduced 2019 last night. It was like, oh man, I got like a message. Like, if you want to know what's in the 2019, what's new? Okay, click on that. Okay, I'm just gonna go over it and say what is new. Okay, so some of the stuff you could control. I think one of the questions you were talking about in the previously is that can you do two hatches on top of one another? 2019 has that now. So you can have two different hatches. One you could be solid fill, the other one it's going to be your, you know, whatever material. So for concrete, it's a perfect thing, right? You can highlight different color, different filters and stuff like that, which is kind of nice. I like that. And the other new thing is that, yes, it supports multiple monitors. So in the past, what happens with Revit, is that it's only single monitor. Right now, it supports multiple monitors. You have one side with plan, the other side could be elevation. And they have this new one called the 3D elevation, or yeah, 3D levels basically. So by default, it's always off in 3D, right? It doesn't show. But new one, you can turn it on and off, right? So I guess someone requested because people are having so much issue with where the level is supposed to be. And also the other thing is that why is the adaptive component has the 3D level? Well, this one doesn't have it. Okay, this doesn't make sense. But right now they put them in, full screen perspective views, blah, blah, blah. I think this is the big one. I guess a lot of people is going to be enjoying this. But I don't know how this is going to work with when you export this out to AutoCAD. I like to know, like, is it going to be two hatches on top of each other, or is it going to be one hatch? So we don't know. So something that I like to know, right? Split railing. Okay, I know that some people were complaining about Revit railing is just not being flexible. So now you can split it. You can have like one continuous railing, but in certain location you want to have like certain jog because there's let's say a pipe or something, right? Now you can split it and just say turn the corner or do something. So something neat. Optimize. Yeah, this is all mechanical. I don't care. Connection, we don't care, right? Section view, rebar. Yeah, that's all the stuff. So that's pretty much the main brunt of it. For AutoCAD, okay, if you want to know what's new in AutoCAD 2019, there's not that much new in AutoCAD 2019 except that they took AutoCAD architecture, electrical, map 3D, etc., and just compress it together. All right, any question? No? All right. Seattle, you guys have any question?
Are they still there?
Are you guys still there? I think they're muted though, but...
Yeah. Seems like.
Seattle, you guys have any question?
I think they're